Hello and welcome to the second episode of this SQL for Data Analysis series. Previously, we looked at what SQL is, different relational database management tools, and from there now, we're going to look at how we can actually download SQL Server, the Microsoft Relational Database Management System, and also SQL Server Management Studio, which is sort of the development environment for SQL Server. So we can choose options like Azure, which is good in enterprise environments, but for now, we're just going to go into Google, we'll navigate to the SQL Server, and we'll choose to download SQL Server Express. And we can open the file, which is just an executable, and we give it permission to make changes to our system, and we can just go ahead and select to download the basic version. It's going to be perfect for our requirements. I've read all this before. I'm going to accept the agreement and install, and we'll wait for SQL Server to do its magic and download. It might take a bit of time depending on your system, but bear with it, and it's a pretty intuitive download and installation process. So Microsoft have worked their magic, everything is installed, and you'll be left with a screen like this saying the installation has completed successfully. And at the bottom of this user interface, you can see the option to install SSMS. SSMS, of course, stands for SQL Server Management Studio, and this is a development environment or code editor, and where we can actually do everything with our SQL Server and basically SQL querying database data. So it takes us to the documentation. Again, we can select the free download for SQL Server Management Studio. And again, that may take a few minutes depending on your system. It's a nice executable and it won't take too long. So I'll see you when that's finished downloading. Now you'll have the usual make changes to your system, that's okay. I'm not too fussed about where this installs. I've already used this before. So I'll just click to install in the default environment that's selected for SQL Server Management Studio. And again, it's just going to go through a process of installing packages. It might seem like a long-winded download and install, but there's a lot of nice add-ons and dependencies that comes with it, so just bear with it. Go do something else, come back, and if it is taking a while, I wouldn't be too alarmed with the progress. So when everything's downloaded, all you actually really need to use, if we're doing this a nice, convenient, simple way, is SQL Server Management Studio. So it will now be installed in your system, so you can use your search bar. I would pin it to your taskbar at the bottom, and it's going to load up with a screen that looks like this. It gives you a default desktop server name. You know, we're not using gateways or on-premise solution. We're just doing this locally for the purposes of illustration, and we can connect to it. And with that, we're ready to go. We're ready to start working with data, creating databases, querying our data, and getting valuable insights, and also improving if we're working with Power BI, improving our data modeling and our processing speeds. So the first thing that we need is to get some data. As we're getting to the end of this tutorial, we're not actually going to create data right now, but we can actually retrieve some data and use a script. And we can look to place this within our system databases, and then we can have separate tables that we can query. Now Microsoft make it very easy for us to get some good quality sample data with some depth that we can practice querying. So we go to GitHub from Google. I'll post the link below, and we can actually go into this samples folder, and from there we can look at the databases, and there's two sort of well-known Power BI and SQL databases, Northwind Pubs, and if we go to this instapubs.sql, we then have the ability just to copy this whole script, and we can use this as a new query as one of our first actions within SQL Server Management Studio. So we can copy that raw contents. As you can see, there's a huge quantity of data in this script. We can just copy it all with that quick shortcut. You can see me here going right down to the bottom. In total, there's around 2,100 lines. So we can actually go into SQL Server Management Studio, and by clicking this button at the top, New Query, we can paste in this script. There we go. And when we do so and click execute, we should get a nice database with this publisher data. So you can see when we execute this query, it shows us the steps it's taken, and eventually it'll show us the completion time in the window, meaning that this has successfully imported the database. Now what we can do in this Object Explorer to the left, we can click the refresh button, and we now have the publisher's database at our disposal. You can see it within pubs. We can expand the tables, and we now have several tables that are sort of relationally linked. So that's SQL Server doing its magic, and we're viewing it on the top with SQL Server Management Studio. Now we can actually use some SQL to then sort of start to query this data. Now to close off this tutorial, there's sort of two ways we can start to query and look at this data. We can right click on a table, so in this case authors, and you can start to see the data. We can click select the top 1000 rows. Now here there aren't 1000 rows, but it will limit that in some cases. Or we can write a new query and use SQL to look at the data. Now you need to know within SQL Server Management Studio we use T-SQL, Transact SQL, which is just a variation, but it really does align to standard SQL practice. And like I said, that's what we use to actually query data and get relevant insights. So we can start with a simple one. We can look at the discounts table. We can click select asterisks from discounts, but there's not a lot of valuable information here. So we can actually select all the data with that asterisk, maybe from the employee table. And now we see some information that's slightly, more insightful, it's more complete, and we could add another constraint here or another condition so that we can see some relevant information. So for example, we could show a relevant, job ID. So we could say where job ID, the column name, is equal to, maybe we want to see everyone with an ID of 5, maybe that relates to a specific job function. And we can execute that. So we've done our first basic SQL queries within SQL Server Management Studio, and we've drilled down on some of our insights. The next episode, we're going to look at sort of the beginnings of database design and some exciting concepts there to move forward our knowledge. As usual, if you like this content or found it helpful, please feel free to like, subscribe, comment, and share. Thank you.